We've got Twitter Tuesday to start your new week on the LockedOn Giants podcast. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. We had a nice long holiday weekend for Memorial Day, and hope you were able to get outside, enjoy it, and just take a break from life, because that's what these holidays are all about. But we are back here on the Locked On Giants podcast with all new shows this week. And we are going to kick it off with a Twitter Tuesday, our weekly mailbag. So we are going to answer your questions from Twitter, as well as a few that came in via email. Happy to do the show as always. Happy to be back on the air and looking forward to bringing you a lot of great Giants content this week. So let us get right into your questions. We're going to kick this off with a question from Independent Outsider, who asks, first, I heard heated debate regarding Jones. Now it's switching to Barkley. From what you have seen, do you think Dable is going to let Saquon loose right away, get Kadarius and Wandale, involved in the running game, or a mixture? And what do you think of the running backups also? Okay, a lot of questions in there. So let's take them one at a time there. Saquon Barkley, I think you're going to see him deployed in a lot of different formations that maybe you haven't seen him deployed in a whole lot of the first few years he's been in the league. So, as far as setting him loose, it's not like a quarterback where you tell the quarterback, okay, throw the ball, run the ball, you decide what you're going to do. I think what you're probably asking is, are the Giants going to get Saquon Barkley more involved? And the answer is yes, they are. There's formations that I've seen during the OTA practices that make me just, for lack of a better term, make my mouth water, because if the Giants execute these schemes and these plays, I think you're going to be very, very happy from what you've seen from the offense. And they play right into the strengths of what Saquon Barkley does so well. Okay. Now, you also asked about getting Kadarius Toney and Wandale Robinson involved in the running game. I do think they will get some touches in the running game. I don't think it'll be like 5 touches a game per guy. I think the Giants will pick and choose where they utilize those two in the run game. But yes, I could see some jet sweeps, some end arounds, that sort of thing from each of those guys. Take advantage of the speed they bring to the table. And then you also asked about the backup running back situation. Well, right now the backup is Matt Breida. So I'm fine with that. Now, if you're talking about who's after Breida, I think it's going to come down to Gary Brightwell, Sandra Platzkummer, and Jashawn, Corbin. Too soon to call that competition. I got to see these guys with pads on. Corbin, from what I have seen in OTAs, very elusive, very explosive runner. I could see him really pushing for Gary Brightwell's spot, but look, you can't rule out Sandra Platzkummer either. So kind of early, I think, to talk about the backup running back situation until they get into pads. So keep that question in mind. And when we get to summer training camp, ask me that again, and I'll be happy to give you an update on where I think things stand with the backup running back situation. All right. Thank you for that question. Up next, we have Carrick Foster, who writes, there seems to be renewed energy within the entire organization this year. What are some of the notable differences from OTAs this year that the past 3 head coaches didn't have? I guess is what you meant to ask. Okay, great question. In terms of the approach, there's a lot more teaching going on. There's not as much 11 on 11, for example, which, remember, there's no contact in these OTAs. I want to make that clear, but there is, some offense versus defense. You will see some of that. Just a lot of teaching, a lot of, patience. If guys are making mistakes, you don't hear a whole lot of hollering going on. You hear, you see coaches going over and making corrections and stuff like that, but not so much, hollering. Because I think, this coaching staff, if I had to say, the biggest difference in its first year is there's a lot more patience happening with this team. So there's also, from what I understand, they're not throwing as much as at these guys at once. Some coaching staffs will throw the entire playbook literally at the players and just, see how they absorb it and how quickly they can execute it. This staff is doing a little bit at a time. So that's good. And then there's just a family atmosphere. I think I talked about this at the rookie mini camp. One of the first things I saw at the rookie mini camp was how, they took pictures of not just the draft class, but the draft class, and the undrafted free agents and everybody. So 3 different group shots. So it's a little bit more of a family atmosphere. And, I'm also seeing some new drills, even from coaches that were on the staff in the past, like, for example, Jerome Henderson. I talked about the tennis ball drill that he was doing. So you see a lot of creative drills. You see a lot of instruction, a lot of coaches who are really getting involved in terms of they're actually showing guys. They're not just standing there barking out orders. They're getting involved and physically showing guys how it should be done. So those are some of the things I think come to mind as far as, changes and differences that I've seen in this spring as opposed to past spring. So thanks for that question. All right, we've got a couple now from Daytime Eli. How different does the new look offense actually look with the same players on the field, unless that's not the case? All right, Eli Daytime. Hold that question for me until after the upcoming mini camp in 2 weeks, because I'm seeing bits and pieces. And right now it's more or less instruction. So I can't sit here and give you a full rundown. What I can tell you is there have been some new alignments that they've used. They've been lining, for example, Saquon Barkley up all over the field, all over the formation. There's a lot more pre-snap motion going on, some different route concepts, some different route combinations that we haven't seen, and different, flow. For example, I know I've seen instances where, the offensive line will pull in one direction and the play will go in the other. And just little funky things that I think are designed to spring open guys in the open field. So, but for more details, again, just hang on to that question. Maybe get back to me after the mandatory minicamp that's coming up next week. And then I should be able to give you even more detail. All right, one more from Daytime Eli. Is KT hurt? He was in a red jersey at OTA number 6. All right, guys, if you're going to reference KT, you got to specify if it's Kadarius Toney or Kayvon Thibodeau. Okay, because KT could apply to either one. In this case, both guys were in red jerseys. Thibodeau did have something. I don't know exactly what it was. I don't know if it was an ankle, a hip, a hamstring, but yes, he was in a red jersey. It is not believed to be serious. Again, these guys don't have to be fully ready until training camp. All right. That's when you ideally want these rookies on the field. It would be nice if he's ready for the mandatory mini camp next week, but it's not the end of the world if he is not. So just, again, for future reference, when you say KT, just specify if you mean Toney or Thibodeau. So, all right, Giant fans, we've got more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. It's a Twitter Tuesday. More of your questions coming up after this. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Twitter Tuesday. But first, there's only one place where you can find what you need quickly for your car or truck, and that's at rockauto.com. Rock Auto has over 20 years of offering competitive pricing on thousands of parts for every make, model, and manufacturer. Check out their extensive catalog online, and don't forget to write down Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. rockauto.com, amazing selection, reliably low prices, and they ship directly to your door. All the parts your car or truck will ever need. That's rockauto.com. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, Catalyst Power partners with you or your trusted energy consultant to produce a power supply plan that fits your business and your market risk tolerance. They have a suite of options customizable to your business's needs, including options that bundle with or focus on renewable energy sources. Right now in New York, Catalyst Power is offering an on-site solar solution for your business that requires zero installation, maintenance, or material purchase costs. That's right, no capital expense costs for you. Plus, qualified businesses could be eligible for up to 6 months of at-cost energy from Catalyst Power. Go to catalystpower.com/LockedOnGiants to learn more. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina, and we are doing a Twitter mailbag, as always, Twitter Tuesday, and one of my favorite shows of the week to do. So thank you, everybody who sent in questions via Twitter or who sent in questions to our email account, LockedOnGiantsPodcast@gmail.com. And before we get into the next batch of questions, just a quick programming note. The Giants have OTA number, I believe it's number 9 coming up on Thursday. So that will be open to the media. I do plan to be there. I do plan to have a report, to do a show on it. So that will probably be Friday's show. So if you have something specific you're interested in, just shoot me an email or a tweet, tag it Ask P Train, and I'll try to look, to see what I can find to accommodate what you're curious about. But really, the time to really go dive into all that stuff is going to be when we get to the mandatory mini camp. That's when I think we'll be able to see a little bit more than what we have seen so far. But that's coming up Thursday. And then, of course, we've just got our regular programming that'll be running all throughout the week. So hope you will tune in to the Locked On Giants podcast. And by the way, thank you again for another record month. We had all-time highs, both on YouTube, both in our audio downloads from, Apple and Google Play. We're talking record highs for the show. And I can't thank you enough for that. That means so much to me. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like our channel, trying to get to 5,000 subscribers. I'd like to get to 5 if I can by the time training camp rolls around, if at all possible. If you are listening on our audio platforms, would appreciate a 5-star review if you feel the program is worth it. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate it. All right, let's get back to your questions. So we have a Twitter question from Ski Fam, Vermont. Is rotating defensive linemen to keep them fresh an urban myth? I don't see a lot of NFL teams regularly rotating O linemen. Wouldn't that keep them fresh too? Theoretically, yes, it would. But here's the thing. With offensive linemen, you want them ideally to build up chemistry and camaraderie. It's going to be the same 5 positions filled every time. All right. So in other words, you're always going to have 2 tackles. You're always going to have 2 guards. You're always going to have a center. On the defensive side, you're going to mix things up. You're going to have sub packages. So that's why you'll see different guys come in. So you might see some alignments where you have 2 down linemen, 2 guys with their hands in the dirt. And on the edges, the 2 guys are standing up. Maybe they bring down the outside linebacker. So it's not so much a rotation to keep the defensive line fresh, although that is part of the factor. But with defensive linemen, it's more or less you're substituting guys. You're matching, you're trying to play chess here. So you're trying to match up who does what for what you're calling for. So, for example, on the goal line, you might have your bigger bodies. If you're rushing the passer, you might have more pass rushers on the line. It's a strategy thing. Whereas, again, on the offensive line, those guys, you roll with the same five because you want the continuity and you want the flow and the chemistry. So it's a little bit different, I think, for offensive line than it is for defensive line. But good question. I know I used to wonder about that too, as a young football fan. And that answer, actually, my dad explained that to me. So hope that answers your question. All right, let's see what else we've got on Twitter. Birdie Maker asks, isn't Thibodeau too light at 255 for an OLB DE? Wasn't Strahan more like 275? I don't remember what Michael Strahan was, but you also have to remember Strahan was a pure defensive end in a 4-3 defensive front. The Giants play a multiple front, which is rooted in the 3-4. So 255, no, that's not too light for a guy who's going to be a stand-up outside linebacker. I don't know how much they're going to ask Thibodeau to put his hand in the dirt. That remains to be seen, but I have a feeling you're going to see him standing up and rushing a lot more from the 2-point stance as opposed to the 3-point stance. So good catch, but little different times and a big difference in the defensive scheme. Okay. Next question comes from Bestan True 4. Will the offense or defense show more improvement this season? You know what? I hope both do. I really do. I mean, I don't know that you could say at this point which one's going to show more. I think it's kind of hard to predict which one's going to show more. I mean, if we go off of last year, the unit that probably needs to really pick things up more so is the offense, because, the offense just wasn't very good last year. So I guess if you use that logic, you could say the offense will show more improvement, but that's so hard to call, to be honest with you, because you're talking new systems across the board. So anything can happen, and then you've got to factor in injuries amongst other stuff. So really difficult, I think, to say it's going to be offense or defense. All right. We have, I think, a couple more left on this Twitter Tuesday. We're going to get to those right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. Patricia Traina, your host, and happy to be with you on this Tuesday, the last day of May. That means we're rolling into June soon enough. Summer is here for all intents and purposes, even though it officially starts on June 21st. And we've got plenty of football left. We have an OTA coming up on Thursday. Then we've got the mandatory minicamp the following week. And then we're going to have a little bit of downtime, in which we're going to take some time off here and there, both here on the podcast as well as over on Giants Country. But until then, we'll have plenty of content, and I won't leave you high and dry with no content during the proverbial black hole in the NFL calendar. We'll make sure you have something that you could tune into if you so choose to. All right. We have a couple more questions on this Twitter Tuesday. These are via email. This one is from Retired Ron, and this was actually sent over to the Giants Country mailbag. But since I just ran a Giants Country mailbag on Saturday, I wanted to throw it into the podcast here, since it references the podcast. And it's more or less a comment, I think. Ron writes, about Barkley being used in the slot. Good to see we're on the same page. What percentage of plays do you think that would be realistic? Ron, it's hard to put a percentage of plays for anything. I mean, you have to see how the game flows. All right. It's just, I can't sit here and say, oh, they're going to use Barkley in the slot on 20% of the plays. I just can't do that because I don't know the full offensive scheme. And plus, I do know that they're going to adapt the scheme to the opponents. So one week you might see Barkley in the slot. maybe for 15 snaps. The next week he might be in the slot for 0 snaps. So really that type of question, Ron, I'm not trying to duck you, but I just don't know. I can't give you a number because I need to get a better feel for, the 11 on 11, the thought process. What are they doing on certain downs? Right now I have little bits and pieces of information. I need to stitch it all together and say, okay, maybe they're going to do this on this down. Maybe they're going to do that on that down, and just kind of figure it out all from there. So thanks for the question. But again, I'll invite you, Ron, send me that question again, maybe, in training, as we get into training camp, like a couple weeks in, because then I should be able to maybe piece some more stuff together and maybe be able to give you an educated guess. I just don't like to spitball and just say what I think it's going to be unless I have something to go on. So, all right, we have one more question from Andrew G, who wants to know, if Xavier McKinney goes down, who do you think can play the single high safety role? The way I see it, McKinney is the only one on the roster with enough range to play the position. I have flashbacks of 2009 of C.C. Brown and Aaron Roos. Oof, yikes. As the safeties, and it was awful. Andrew, I would think that if Xavier McKinney goes down, and knock on wood that he doesn't, Julian Love might be a candidate. Could they maybe move one of the cornerbacks to the deep safety role? Possibly. Could Dane Belton maybe do some of that work? I think it might be a committee approach. I don't necessarily think it's going to be one guy. Matter of fact, as I watch some of this defense and how it's coming together, I don't know that Xavier McKinney is exclusively going to be the deep center fielder. I think there's going to be instances where you're going to see him come up in the box, and there's going to be others where you see him drop deep into coverage. So it's really going to depend. Again, this coaching staff, I'll say it again, they are going to mix and match based on the opponent, based on, where they're at, what their personnel is. And I don't know that we should necessarily expect anything other than to expect the unexpected. As cliched as that sounds, we're still learning about this offense. So let's see how they pull it all together, Andrew, because it's going to be fun. I have a feeling that this defense is going to be fun to watch. And I don't think we're going to have to worry about, shades of C.C. Brown and Aaron Roos. I'm sorry. I'm thinking Andrew Roos. Aaron Roos. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that. Just my gut feeling. Don't forget Dane Belton's also in the mix, So the Giants have options. Let's just leave it at that. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for today's episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you keep it here the rest of the week. We'll have more programming. Again, the Giants OTA is on Thursday. There is media avail scheduled for that day. So I will have for you a report either late Thursday, or I'll just drop it Friday. I'll have to see how the timing goes, but I will give you an update on that, and we'll just keep on rolling. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, everybody, have a great one.